Hey, what's going on, guys? Kalamazi here, and today is Wednesday, which means there is a new Shadowlands beta build. I can say today was indeed a pretty big build for Warlocks. Today was the day we got all of our potency, which are the DPS conduits that go into the soulbinds, which are a part of the covenants, revealed to us. So we had, I believe, 4 or 5 preliminary finesse and endurance conduits of it already revealed to us, which are more or less throughput, like healing, sustainability, throughput, or utility conduits. But we have all the DPS ones now. So I want to talk about all of them today. What we're going to do, I'm going to review each one individually here. We'll go over the whole section of them on the vendor here, and then we'll have a sections of the video talking about each individual one more in depth, what it does for each spec, how it changes things, and just what we can expect from that spec due to this new relic. And one brief, quick, shameless plug before we get into that. All my weak auras, profiles, and add-ons you see here are available to you guys for free on my Twitch if you want to swing by. Add-ons and weak auras, everything are now working on beta. So if you want them, feel free to swing by, grab them anytime, drop a follow, ask any questions. I will be updating them over the course of beta. So hopefully I'll have most of them ready to go live when the actual game goes live. So let's get right into these new Warlock Conduits. I have to admit, they're pretty impressive. The first ones we have here, I guess we'll end up reviewing the finesse and endurance ones briefly. The first one we have is Resolute Barrier. Attacks received that deal at least 5% of your health decrease on enemy resolves cooldown by 10 seconds. This cannot occur more than once every 30 seconds. The second one here we have is called Accrued Vitality. Drain life heals for 44% of the amount drained over 8.3 seconds. Now, I imagine this does stack with ID and things, so this could be pretty powerful, a pretty powerful heal after the initial drain life heal and damage goes out. I don't even know how to say this word, I'll be real with you, I'm surprised, but reduces the cooldown of Fell Domination by 48 seconds. Keep in mind, Fell Domination is a 3-minute cooldown, so this still does not address the issue of pet twisting in Mythic Plus and things like that, but it's there if you want it. Shade of Terror. Damage required to break your fear effects is increased by 100%. It's cool. It's relevant in probably PvP and certain things, but it's a finesse conduit. So the one we have here, I guess the final one we have here. Yep, this is the final finesse utility-esque conduit. Demonic Circle increases movement speed by 30% for 5 seconds. This is actually relevant. This could be used... Movement speed bonuses have always been impactful, relevant in PvE, PvP, so don't underestimate this conduit itself. Moving on to the DPS conduits, we have Corrupting Leer, I suppose, Agony, and Unstable Affliction damage, I suppose, has a 3% chance to reduce the cooldown of Summon Dark Lair by 5 seconds. Focused Malignancy? There you go. I thought it was Malignity, actually, but whatever. Malefic Rapture deals 25% increased damage to targets, plural, targets, suffering from your Unstable Affliction. Unfortunately, Unstable Affliction is limited to 1 here. I have a feeling this might relate to the Malignant Affliction trait here we have for PvP, as to why it's worded like that, but I don't know. This is not yet implemented either. So we'll have to wait and see what happens with this conduit here. Number 3, Rolling Agony. Increases the duration of Agony by 4 seconds. Cold Embrace. Increases the effectiveness of Shadow's Embrace by 33%. So these are the 4 Affliction conduit abilities we have here. Moving on to Demonology. Born of Blood. Hand of Gul'dan has a 16% chance to generate a charge of demonic core. Number 2. Carnivorous Stalkers. Your Dreadstalkers attacks have an 8% chance to trigger an additional Dread Bite. Dread Bite is the ability they cast when they first jump in to whatever melee range you're attacking. Each one bites individually with Dread Bite, so there's 2 iterations of Dread Bite. Tyrant's Soul. After a demonic tyrant expires, gain a demonic core, which is an instant cast Demon Bolt, and 10% increased damage from your demons for 15 seconds. That's pretty impactful. It's spicy. Final Demonology conduit we have here is called Fell Commando. Your Fell Guard deals 10% more damage and takes 10% less damage. Solid. It's relevant. So these are the 4 Demonology conduits we have here. Moving on to Destruction. Duplicitous Havoc. Havoc transfers 10% more damage. Solid. It's relevant. Not flashy, not super exciting, but it will be relevant. Combusting engine. I thought it was combustion engine also. Conflict rate increases your remaining immolate damage by 15% until immolate expires or is refreshed. There's a lot to this conduit, so we have a lot to talk about when we get to this section of the video here. Ashen Remains. Chaos Bolt and Incinerate damage on targets with immolate, or I guess, yeah, with immolate, is increased by 5%. Most of the time you're going to have immolate rolling, so there you go. Infernal Brand. Your Infernal's melee attacks cause its target to take 10% increased damage from its immolation, meaning immolation aura. It's the fire Infernal that pulses around your Infernal, stacking up to 15 times. Prolonged decimation. I'm sorry. Now, this is a potency conduit. It shares the same conduit type with the rest of the DPS-based ones here. There are 4 of these. I will talk about this one here, and then we'll talk about the other three soul binds in different covenants conduits. What a nightmare! The different conduits from other covenants later on in the video. Shadow Bolt has a 20% chance to not consume a charge of Decimating Bolt. This works for Shadow Bolt for Demonology and Affliction. This works for Incinerate for Destruction. And this also works for Drain Soul if you have Drain Soul as Affliction. I'll let that sink in for a second. So, like I said, let's get into the video a bit more here and talk a bit more about each individual relic and take a look at it in combat. Okay, so starting off with the Affliction conduits here, there are 2 for the spec that are sort of hard to just see as far as play is concerned, and those are Rolling Agony, which increases the duration of your agony by 4 seconds, and Corrupting Leer, which make agony and Unstable Affliction have a 3% chance to reduce the cooldown of Summon Dark Lair by 5 seconds. Now, I will make an attempt to sort of show you Corrupting Leer here, but it's just sort of hard to like see. It's sort of like VOP Minor Dreadful Calling on live. There's a lot of similar traits to this. You can get a Dark Lair to around like a minute 10, minute 20 on a lot of cleave based dummies. But the question is, like, you're desyncing it if you're playing Dark Caller. But the question is, you're sort of desyncing it from your Dark Soul, which made Dark Caller sort of more powerful. So is Creeping Death worth it? Chances are very low of that actually being the case. But it's sort of odd. Like, is the CD reduction here really even worth it if you're playing Dark Caller? But regardless, we'll take a bit of a look at that. And Rolling Agony, there's not a whole lot to this relic. There's not really like a DPS increase or anything here per se. There's no weird Wrath and Agony interactions, because honestly, you can just refresh your agony before, like, as long as you maintain your agony and don't let it fall, you're going to get the same amount of damage out of your agony regardless because of pandemics, as long as you're refreshing it within pandemic range. So I don't really see the point of this relic here or this conduit unless I'm missing something. It just seems like a relic that makes it easier to maintain dots. I'm not really sure. The 3 relics or conduits we're going to like work with here actually, and excuse me if I call them relics, I'm sorry. There's covenants, conduits, soul binds, there's 10,000 different things that I mix up, I'm sorry, but we'll get used to it. So the 3 we're going to look at here that we can see in gameplay. Number 1 is Prolonged Decimation. Now this affects Decimating Bolt. This is the Maldraxxus Necrolord based potency conduit for Warlocks. Shadow Bolt has a 20% chance to not consume a charge of Decimating Bolt. Well, the cool thing here is no one really cares about Shadow Bolt. People care a whole lot about Drain Soul. And even though I'm playing Drain Soul right now, it still says Shadow Bolt. However, I can confirm this does work with Drain Soul. The interaction between Decimating Bolt and Drain Soul's Execute and this legendary is already incredibly powerful. Getting an extra drain or 2 out with this relic is insane. It's so powerful. And in Execute range, if this procs, like, you're going to leave warriors. You're going to leave everybody behind. It's not even going to be close for execute damage. You're going to decimate. Get it? Anyways, moving on. Second legendary or conduit here. Malefic Rapture deals 25% increased damage to targets suffering from Unstable Affliction. Once again, targets. UA is limited to 1 target. So, for the most part, this is your Malefic Grasp-esque, sort of like your single target amplification conduit that we have for Affliction. I'm going to say it is relevant. Rapture already deals a good bit of our damage here, but I'll show you when we attack this dummy in a second. It's relevant. It does a good bit of our damage. Number 3, Cold Embrace. Increases the effectiveness of Shadow's Embrace by 33%. So I'm going to put my turnip down here, and we can hit this. Now keep in mind, Shadow's Embrace stacks 369%. So I'll just cast a Drain here, and you'll see the actual increase here, 3711. So we're probably looking at about like 11.5% damage amp here. But it's important to keep in mind, these conduit abilities, they all increase from rank 1 to rank 15. I believe the buff here, somebody mentioned, is like at rank 15 is 48%, maybe even higher than that. It equates to, I believe, like a 17% damage increase from Shadow's Embrace being active, which is massive because Shadow's Embrace affects every single one of our damaging abilities, not just dots, not just Drain Soul. It's everything, which further amplifies Drain Soul's execute. It's insane. So let's do a normal rotation here. We're going to be playing the Drain Soul Legendary, the Malefic Rapture one as well. Now, I do have a template character on beta. However, somebody was nice enough to craft me multiple pieces of gear. So we'll just play Writhe and Agony and Dark Hollow here to make it a bit, easier to maintain dots. It's not hard, but like to just really look at Drain Soul cycles here because I'm going to be talking and doing the same thing at once. So we'll open up here normally. Haunt, Corruption, or Agony Corruption. We'll go Dark Soul, Singularity, Zerking, UA, Dark Lair. We'll Bolt and Rapture to 3 here. Rapture, 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 and we'll Drain. Having this much haste is nice because we can get 2 full Drain Souls into this actual rotation. We'll refresh our actual Rapture here and Drain again. Now, the cool thing is here, I'm going to try and maintain this rotation for a little bit. You'll see that Drain Soul is a large portion of our damage. But look up here. This is our 4th Drain, and that was our 4th Drain, or Drain Soul actually being buffed by the Decimating Bolt effect that Necrolord brings. That's due to that first conduit. We got 1 extra drain off there. It's so incredibly impactful. It's so strong. The damage amp it brings, even outside of execute, a flat 200% bonus damage amp is ridiculously powerful. So that's really nice. Being able to chain that and execute is going to be so incredibly OP. We'll refresh dots here, go into our Decimating Bolt, Rapture 3 times, and then we will once again, we'll look at our overall damage here. There's 3 stacks. We'll Drain Soul. We have to refresh Rapture here, though, and then we can double Drain. Our Corruption's going to fall, but it's fine. We'll look at Drain Soul damage having here at the same time. So we'll Drain Soul, and we'll Drain Soul. And look, there we go. But look here. We actually lost the buff. So what I'm trying to show you there is that it's a bit odd. It checks... The ability here checks... Let me pull this up. This conduit checks... It more or less updates the remaining stack of Decimating Bolt damage amps you have at the end of the Drain Soul channel. It's sort of odd. So it's a bit hard to track here. It's not very... It doesn't really work the way you think it would. However, like I said... Getting even 1 extra Drain off is incredibly impactful. Earlier, we had 7 full Drain Soul cast with 3 stacks of Malefic Rapture off of 1 Decimating Bolt, and the damage was insane. Looking at the overall damage breakdown here, Drain Soul is 37.3% of our damage. Now, that's a bit high from what I've normally seen. We're normally sitting around 30-ish%, but we had 1 or 2 extra Drains there, which were buffed by Rapture, and we had our Dark Lair, Dark Soul CDs rolling as well. So it makes sense as to why it's, a bit inflated. I've seen Rapture anywhere from 12 to 16% of our damage playing Writhe and Agony, and baseline Corruption, not playing Siphon here. But 18% is impactful, and a good portion of that is actually due to this conduit as well, buffing Malefic Rapture damage. I like what this does for the spec. It might not increase all of our single target damage like Malefic Grasp did, or a lot of our dots damage, but still, Rapture does hit hard. With it being devalued a bit here due to Drain Soul being so excessively strong, it still hits hard, and this conduit makes it hit even harder. It gives AF that single target kind of feel, and I think it really, really helps shore up Affliction's toolkit a good bit, both in Mythic Plus and honestly in rating. Okay, just to show you guys the actual conduits that we didn't really review in the previous section of the video here, I swapped to the actual Rolling Agony one, which increases the duration of Agony by 4 seconds, and I also swapped to the one here that gives Agony and UA a 3% chance to reduce the cooldown of Summon Dark Lair by 5 seconds. Now, I'm going to play Dark Caller here. Our new ability. I'm also going to play Absolute Corruption. We'll play Drain Soul, Singularity. We're going to play Dark Soul Misery here. And we're going to use Dark Soul sort of I'll pull up my stopwatch as well, so we can really see how long the actual Dark Lair cooldown is on 3 targets with this ability. Now keep in mind, it's going to be a baseline 2 minutes, but we'll be able to see how much this actually reduces our CD by for the most part here. So let's get right into this. Let's go. Now I'm just going to throw up Agony and Corruption here. The rotation is probably not going to be optimal as far as like min-maxing everything goes, but it's important to keep it, or it's important to maintain my Unstable Affliction as well as my 3 Agonies here, so we can get like the maximum CD reduction. So one of the cool things about this relic is, or this conduit, is that it does, I'm going to say relic and conduit a million times, and I'm sorry, is that it's not just based off like whenever you apply Agony or whatever. It's based off every time Agony or Unstable Affliction deals damage, and this is sort of potentially one of the reasons as to why maybe they wanted to limit Unstable Affliction's ability to be spread. It makes a bit more sense that like, oh yeah, okay, well maybe we should limit how many UAs they can have rolling, because their Dark Lair reduction might end up being pretty insane. Having 3 or 4 Agonies rolling and 3 or 4 UAs on 4 mobs Mythic Plus is probably going to give you a pretty short actual Dark Lair timer here. If you actually look right there, you can see the CD being reduced on it a bit. So we're looking at roughly, what, 1.5 minutes Dark Lair here, give or take a bit. Let's actually finish this off here until it fully comes off CD and see if we can notice any kind of reduction, maybe any procs we get here. We're at 20 seconds and 1:15 on the actual stopwatch since we popped our Dark Lair. So it looks like, let me refresh UA once more here. We're looking at roughly about 1.5 minutes Dark Lair. So it seems to shave, I think it's a proc right there. Yeah, there's a proc right there as well. So it seems to shave roughly about 30-ish seconds off your Dark Lair over the course of, well, you know, I mean, 1.5 minutes. So essentially on 3 targets, that should probably translate to, I don't know, around, what are we looking at, like a 220-ish Dark Lair without playing Dreadful Calling, because there's a bit more extra value there because you're actually going longer, right? Sorry, not Dreadful Calling, Dark Caller, right? Because you're actually going longer in the cast before it comes off CD. So I don't know if it'll pair it perfectly with your Dark Soul, just playing this trait by itself. It reminds me a lot of Dreadful Calling on live, where you were playing this in like a weird VOP minor build to try and sync them up. However, we do also have a legendary effect for Affliction, which further reduces the actual cooldown on your Dark Lair. It's the Wilfred Sigil of Superior Summoning one that goes across all 3 specs. Every time you cast Malefic Rapture, basically every soul shard you spend reduces your summon Dark Lair by 1 additional second. So pairing this legendary with this conduit can probably get you a 2-minute Dark Lair if you're playing the baseline 3-minute one without Dark Caller. But the question is it really worth playing this conduit potential, or this conduit potentially over other ones with more throughput, and also wearing what is most likely going to be a subpar legendary, because we have Wrath of Consumption, Slow Ring, and the actual Malefic Rapture Drain legendary. For the most part, though, I do think the AF conduits are pretty strong. There are, you know, I don't really know what to make of this Agony one, besides just it makes it easier to maintain your Agonies, but that's just, you know, sort of the way it is. There probably is some hidden potential here with certain push timers and things on fights, but for the most part, like I said, I don't think you're really going to want Creeping Death at all. Even if you're playing a 1.5 minute Dark Lair build somewhere for whatever reason, you might just end up holding your Dark Soul for a little bit. But the actual Prolonged Decimation relic conduit here that gives you extra Drain Soul cast is incredibly powerful. So overall, I think Affliction has some pretty solid relics. I think it helps shore up the spec a lot. Oh, and by the way, the increased Malefic Rapture damage, single target-wise, Pseudo-Malefic Grasp conduit also is one of my personal favorites so far. Alright, so switching gears here and getting to Demonology conduits, I have 2 soul binds for Demo with my Venthyr character. So I did 2 and 2, essentially making it a bit easier to test, because each soul bind is eventually going to have 3 potency conduits total. That was confirmed earlier today, I believe by Ian in a blue post somewhere. So there are a few, I guess there are 2 for Demonology that are relatively easy to see as far as in-game combat goes, and then there are 2 that are sort of like, okay, a bit of a passive increase, but still relevant. So the first one we have here is Hand of Gul'dan has a 16% chance to generate a charge of Demonic Core. Now keep in mind, there are 15 ranks for each potency relic here, so it'll have a higher chance to generate a charge of Demonic Core the higher you go. This is something that you can see in game. I'll probably end up hitting a dummy in a minute here or so. And the interesting thing here as well is that there is a legendary that interacts with this. I think if I can find this here. Let me see. My bags are a complete nightmare at this point with beta being a thing. Here we go. The Hand of Gul'dan having a 15% chance to cast a second time on your target for free. Now, it's only a 15% chance to get 2 Hand of Gul'dans, right? So it's a relatively low chance, and then you also have a 16% chance off of a 15% chance to proc 2 editions of Demonic Core, or I guess proc a Demonic Core charge off of that second Hand of Gul'dan cast. Now, it's going to be a very low percent proc rate. It's going to be very hard to test in-game, but essentially the wording on this says you cast a second Hand of Gul'dan, so it should bring everything with it. It brings the same amount of imps as the first one you put shards into. It brings the same splash damage. It brings a second visual. So essentially this legendary being paired with this conduit could give you a chance to essentially generate 2 Demonic Core stacks off of Hand of Gul'dan. So it's cool. This is a good effect, probably one of the better ones for Demonology anyway, so chances are high you probably end up running this, and I feel this legendary probably is one of, if not the best for Demo at this point also. The second potency conduit we have here is called Tyrant Soul. After your Demonic Tyrant expires, gain a Demonic Core charge, 1 instant cast Demon Bolt, and 10% increased damage for your demons for 15 seconds. So I'm going to enter combat here. Let me make sure that Soul Line is active. She is not, but I can activate her. There we go. Now she is. So let's do this. So this weak aura will show Demonic Core procs. So basically, what we're looking for here is an actual Demonic Core proc after we end up casting a Hand of Gul'dan. There's going to be a few coming in from Called Dreadstalkers and things like that, but let's see what we can do. I already have a pet out, it's fine. So let's just do a normal opener here for the most part we've been doing on beta for the most part. Bolt into Grimoire, Vile Fiend, Dreadstalkers, and I'll cast 2 Shadow Bolts here. 3 Imps, Hand of Gul'dan, summon Demonic Tyrant, and there we go. So we're going to cast a hand here, and just keep watching for a random proc. We're going to have 2 cores coming in right about now from our dogs expire. We would, but they're extended. We would have about 2 coming in now. We're going to have a decent bit in a few minutes here, a few seconds once this Tyrant expires. But also, watch this here. There's 2. Look at this buff we have here. Tyrant Soul. Damage dealt by your demons is increased by 10, so you can track that through an actual buff on your character pretty easily. And now that Demonic Consumption does not consume imps or actual dogs or like that, look at all the core procs we have here. We're swimming in core procs. Now that it doesn't actually consume our imps and we want our dogs and our Vile Fiend and all of our pets out at once, there's actually a proc right there. There's another proc right there. It becomes so valuable. It's actually a very strong conduit. Demonology's conduits, I thought they were a bit underwhelming, but being real, they're actually pretty impressive. So let's take a look at the last 2 here to round out Demonology's conduits as a whole, because there's one that I also want to talk about a bit in depth. There's a spicy build here. Okay, so the last 2 Demonology conduits we have here as far as potency goes. The first one says your Felgar deals 10% more damage and takes 10% less damage. In the end, that's great because our pets die all the time. It's perfect. This should affect Demonic Strength, Fellstorm, all those abilities, so that's important. That's relevant to keep in mind because the first talent row here we have Demonic Strength, Bombers, and Dreadlash, but it should only affect Demonic Strength out of these 3. Now you might be asking here, why does he have the Dreadlash talent selected? Well, the second relic here, Conduit. Sorry. Carnivorous Stalkers. Your Dreadstalkers attacks have an 8% chance to trigger an additional Dread Bite. So I believe each individual Dreadstalker hits 6 times. So that's a total of 12 individual melee casts. Now, if one Dreadstalker procs Carnivorous Stalkers an extra Dread Bite, it does not proc Dread Bite off both. It's that individual dog's melee attack. But let's reset the meters here briefly and go into an opener. This is already active as far as our Soulbind is, and we're also going to swap a legendary briefly. Actually, we already have it on. Perfect. Each soul shard spent on Hand of Gul'dan increases the damage of your next called Dreadstalkers by 3%. So I want to head to Dazara lore and show you Dreadstalker, Dreadlash, AoE with this legendary conduit combination. It's pretty impressive. So we have finally arrived into Zaralor, boys. I've had a great time making this video, but I can say I've spent twice the amount of time traveling back and forth between my Covenant area and different training dummies to make this video. So let's get this Demonology Dreadlash section underway here. So we are still playing the Dreadlash Legendary. We are playing the Dreadlash, I guess the Dread Stalker Conduit, Carnivorous Stalkers. Let's just go into our normal opener on 4 targets here, and we'll look at the damage meters after about a minute or so. Now, keep in mind, yes, Demonic Consumption might not be as powerful as it is on live right now due to, like, not having 3 Baleful Invocation traits, but it still makes up the majority of our damage on beta, or, well, I should say has. Let's do this. We'll do a normal opener here once again. Demon Bolt into Grimoire, Vile Fiend, called Dreadstalkers. Now, once again, I know that Vile Fiend is not being extended here. It's a bug. You'll see it in a second. It hopefully will be fixed soon. We're going to double hand of Gul'dan here. Double hand right into a Tyrant. And then we're going to go hand of Gul'dan again. Now, I'm actually going to hold my Dreadstalkers here for a second because there's a bug right now and it will actually cause my Demonic Tyrant to despawn if I cast him right now. I gave feedback on that in my most recent feedback video. So I'll wait for him to despawn. Now, Dreadstalkers. Bam. And you can see them bite there. Look at all that damage come out. Look at all that damage. Yes, this is 4 targets, but Dreadlash with the Legendary. The Legendary damage increase stacks, and it does indeed affect their Dread Bite damage. Dreadlash, Dread Bite. It does indeed affect that damage. It's extremely powerful. So I'm going to give it about, let's see here. Let's give it about another 20 seconds or so, and then we'll take a look at overall damage here. It's truly impressive what they can do. Now, we're not actually imploding here either, which probably should be, to be fair. We'll start imploding, I guess, after this a bit here to try and, like, even things out a bit. But regardless, it looks very different from what you normally see. It almost... I'll let you guys take a look. We'll set up one more implosion here. Going the dogs. Implode. Look at the Dreadlash damage here. Dread Bite damage. Look at the Dread Bite damage. It's ahead of Demon Fire, and they're still going. I just cast my most recent set of dogs. There's 40 actual hits here, and like you'll see every once in a while when one actually procs off a melee hit, it'll go 41, 43. It's not always when one has that 8% chance to proc and procs it both Dread Bite. But the thing is, the damage is so insane here. Now, it might you might be saying, well, yeah, Demonic Strength and Bombers are also really good in that row, arguably better. And for the most part, you would probably be right. However, Dreadlash is a CD that is essential, or a talent that is essentially affected by just casting called Dreadstalkers every 20 or so seconds. And most of the time, Dreadstalkers is instant cast. It's very easy to cast in Mythic Plus when you're on the move and even being stationary. Dreadstalkers does not it costs 2 soul shards, but so does Bombers. And Bombers has a 10-second longer CD. Demonic Strength having a minute. It's impressive. The damage is surprising. Normally, it looks like this in favor of Demon Fire. Now, once again, we are playing a Legendary that inflates our Dreadstalker's damage, as well as an actual Dreadlash talent, and the Relic here. But this is definitely a build, a conduit, and a build to potentially keep an eye on for Demonology, as I was surprised. The Dreadlash damage, Dread Bite damage, I'm sorry, truly is impactful. Okay, I finally flew back after 20 minutes of swapping conduits to talk about destruction. Now, there's pretty much 2 of 4 conduits here that we can really look at in combat. So let's just review the 2 that are sort of like passive effects. One we talked about was Havoc transfers 10% more damage. Basically, the target you put Havoc on is going to take, I suppose, 70% of your damage dealt to your main target instead of 60. It's solid. It'll be very strong on cleave fights. The majority of the settings where you play Destruction, barring Destruction being really good single target as well. The second option we have here, Ashen Remains. Chaos Bolt and Incinerate damage on targets with Immolate. The wording on this is so weird. Chaos Bolt and Incinerate damage on targets with Immolate increased by 5%. Pretty much, this just says Chaos Bolt and Incinerate damage increased by 5%. You're going to have Immolate rolling on every target. Targets you're Chaos Bolting and Incinerating the vast majority of the time. I suppose that if you're playing Fire and Brimstone and Mythic Plus, you might not have Immolate rolling on multiple mobs. If you're playing Channel Demon Fire, probably just like 1, maybe 2 for CDF usage. But for the most part, in most raid settings, you're going to have a 5% buff to your Chaos Bolt and Incinerate damage. Where it gets really interesting, though, is when you start looking at the actual relic or conduits that matter. these sort of matter, but you'll see what I mean here. Infernal Brand, Potency Conduit. Your Infernal's melee attacks cause its target to take 10% increased damage from its immolation, stacking up to 15 times. So, when we dropped an Infernal earlier, it dealt roughly, without this Soulbind being active, it dealt roughly 11,000 damage as far as its immolation aura was concerned. And that was without, like, Roaring Blaze, everything else. Actually, come to think of it, immolation aura is fire damage, right? It's our fire damage spells, though, I imagine. Regardless, the next time we ended up actually testing with our Infernal, our immolation aura dealt an insane amount of damage. If you look at the target here, you can also see this debuff stacking. Infernal Brand, taking 60%, 70% increased fire damage from the Infernal. Now, I have not been able to test with this with Reign of Chaos to see if it deals more damage. It's sort of tough because, I mean, every Infernal will deal immolation aura damage. So it's hard to see if, like, this target's just taking, like, 150% increased damage from every immolation aura or just the main Infernal. But regardless, that Infernal dealt 17,000 damage just through immolation aura. That was the same amount of damage that all those Incinerates we just cast. 17 Incinerates dealt. It's a big buff to immolation aura. Now, it is also important to mention here that this is single target. This is not applied to every target, from what I can see. If it's being applied to every target, either the wording is off or, well, it's not intended. So this is a single target Potency Conduit, but it's a large DPS increase. This is really impactful. This is one that I'm very excited about for Destruction. But there's one more, which is further enhanced by one of our legendaries, that I also want to talk to you guys about. The final Destruction Conduit I want to talk to you guys about is Combusting Engine. I feel like it should be Combustion Engine. The wording sounds so weird in that too. Conflict Rate increases your remaining Immolate damage by 15% until Immolate expires or is refreshed. Increases by 15%. So what I'm going to do, here's my combat log. We're going to put up an Immolate. This is actual impact application damage. But periodic damage is for 373 or so damage. 373, 342, Keck W spell variants. But sure, about 350, 360 ish, 349, 370. When I'm going to refresh my Immolate. When I con flag, watch for one tick here. 366, con flag. 407. Let's con flag again. Oh, it's 473. Con flag again. Oh, it's 566. This ability stacks. Con flag again. Oh, it's a lot of damage. This ability stacks. It doesn't indicate that it stacks. It sort of does by the wording. It just says it increases the damage by 15%. I sort of feel like there should be some kind of indication saying that this does stack, but it does indeed stack. Now, the thing is, number one, this, again, makes the triple con flag legendary even more impactful than it already has been for a lot of reasons. Roaring Blaze, everything else. It's very, very strong. We're also not playing with Roaring Blaze here, by the way. We're playing with Reign of Chaos. That was not Roaring Blaze damage, if you saw there, but it scales even more with that. So THC was on stream, and a handful of people were asking, well, how does it work with internal combustion? Because there's no way that it works with internal combustion, right? Well, internal combustion is based off of Immolate damage. And by the way, well, we'll get to that. Here's what we're going to do. Baseline Immolate. Chaos Bolt. It hit, my internal combustion hit for 658 damage. Alright, we'll back away. We'll drop combat, wait for shards to regen. Let's do this. Let's regen a few shards. Internal Immolate, Con Flag, Chaos Bolt. Oh, it hit for 744. Well, the last one also hit for around there, 658. Let's just make sure there's no spell variants in there. Let's just see what happens. All right. Generate a few shards here. Put up an Immolate, Con Flag, triple Con Flag, Chaos Bolt. It hit for 1,050. This also works with internal combustion. It sort of makes sense because it just consumes Immolate's raw damage over time effect for 5 seconds, and your Immolate is buffed, and this effect stacks. Now, I will admit, internal combustion is incredibly OP on live servers right now. The thing is, internal combustion scales with haste. I am on a template character right now with 6% haste, 6, 7, 8, 10, depending what you're doing. I have a character with crafted gear on beta with 22% haste. We tried a single target internal combustion build. It was about 5% of my damage, not around, oh, I don't know, 13. Whatever it is on live. We don't have the raw haste you have in BFA right now. Even removing Expedient, we don't have that N tier level of haste with multiple sockets and all that. So, internal combustion is nowhere near as impactful as it is on live, but it's a very low-key interaction here. But it's important to point out that this does work with internal combustion, and it's further amplified by Roaring Blaze and things. So, if you guys are excited about a fire build of Destro, I don't think we're playing internal combustion there anyways, but if you're excited about it, there's that interaction. Hopefully you guys like internal combustion later in the expansion because, well, with that being a thing, triple Conflict Legendary and that relic, or that conduit, could be a thing, depending on scaling. So taking a look at each individual Covenant's, I guess, class-based conduit, which revolves around that class-based ability, we've already seen the Necrolord Decimating Bolt one. Like we said, it works for Shadow Bolt, for Affliction in Demonology, or Drain Soul for Affliction, and Incinerate for Destruction. I didn't really touch on this a whole lot for Destro, but it's also very powerful with Fire and Brimstone, Decimating Bolts, sniping, that damage increase. It's also very good there. It's just good across the board. Once again, I think Demonology has the shortest end of the stick with this conduit, but well, that's just the way things are. Looking at the Kyrian conduit here. When a target dies under the effect of Scouring Tithe, you gain 10% increased damage from your Rapture for Affliction, Demons for Demonology, which I sort of feel should be tied into the Decimating Bolt version of this, you know, for Maldraxxus, for Demonology Wars, or whatever, and Chaos Bolt for 10 seconds. So it's a flat 10% damage increase to both of your, basically all of your spenders, which is solid, but the target has to die. So in Mythic Plus, I mean, things do die at a staggered rate. You can get a lot of value technically on this on certain bosses, but if a target dies while Scouring Tithe is active, you also get 5 shards back. You don't get the CD reset. So there's a lot of play to this. Scouring Tithe, I think, could be good, like really good in certain spots, and this would further amplify that. Other spots, it's probably just not going to be very good. The Soul Rot ability, Exhumed Soul, which is the Night Fae Ardenweald Covenant. Soul Rot damage and radius increased by 20%, but cost 7% more health. It's an increase to the dot damage, and it might hit a few more targets. It's cool, but I don't think the only Covenant, or the only spec this is really relevant for, I feel, even in a sense, is Affliction with ID at this point. You know, who knows? The actual Maldraxxus, I'm sorry, the actual Venthyr Revendreth ability here is called Catastrophic Origin. Impending catastrophes damage over time, and the inflicted curse lasts 50% longer against your primary target. Now, impending catastrophes damage over time effect, the dot, does indeed count as a dot towards Malefic Rapture. The same can be said for Scouring Tithe, and the same can be said for Soul Rot. So the extension here is relevant, however, it's not every target, it's only one. If you're pairing this with the actual Malefic Rapture conduit that increases that target's damage taken when UA is active on it, this can provide a lot of extra single target damage, as well as, you know, cleave AoE based damage. But for the most part, I mean, you can't deny the power of extra buffed Fire and Brimstone Incinerates, or just extra Drain Souls as a whole. They all are interesting, but the Maldraxxus Covenant, or Conduit, I'm sorry, is, well, Covenant as well, is still probably the front runner in my eyes, for me personally. Thanks for watching, guys. I hope this video gave you all a better understanding of the brand new Warlock Conduits that we should be receiving in, well, Shadowlands. I have to admit, I am pretty impressed with Destro, Demo, and Affliction. There are some that have some pretty interesting interactions. Some are certainly more valuable than others, comparing the Conflag increased damage to Immolate Legend or Conduit versus an increase to your Agony's duration, but regardless, they're all probably going to be pretty powerful in a handful of scenarios. Let me know what you guys think of them in the comment section below, and if you have any questions about them or in general, feel free to post them there as well, and I'll be sure to get back to you. If you guys want to see more WoW content and help support the channel, feel free to smash that subscribe button below. Helps out a lot. Thanks again, dudes, and I will see you all soon on stream. Peace.